masih diperlukan. Dunia ini masih perlukan dia. Bukan Malaysia ni, dunia ini. Pengalaman dia tentang hubungan dengan badan-badan antarabangsa, peranan dia dalam konflik, menyelesaikan konflik-konflik kemanusiaan, konflik politik, memperdekatkan perbezaan mazhab-mazhab dalam Islam, takarib mazahib yang disertai oleh Tuan Guru. Besar fungsi dia kepada dunia ni. Dunia masih memerlukan Tuan Guru, PAS masih perlukan dia, Malaysia masih perlukan dia. Sabar.
Okay, let's try and unpack this for you. Imagine this figure, deeply rooted in, say, a provincial village setting, fluent in religious scripture, but then also equally comfortable navigating the really complex world of national politics and, well, international diplomacy.
Yeah.
This is Tan Sri Abdul Hadi Awang, the longtime leader of PAS, Malaysia's Islamic Party. It's quite the paradox.
It really is. It's a blend you don't see that often, is it? And it kind of highlights a central challenge, I think, for Islamic political movements today.
Which is?
Well, how do you maintain that local credibility, that authenticity, while also, engaging on a global stage and operating within the realities of a very specific national political system?
Exactly. And that tension, that's really at the heart of our deep dive today. We're exploring the international side of Abdul Hadi Awang's leadership, drawing insights from this specific analysis you shared. Our mission here is to understand how a figure from Malaysia's East Coast could, well, rise to become a notable voice in global Islamic discussions. How he balances those demands, they seem conflicting.
Totally.
And what his path tells us about maybe the evolution of political Islam now.
And the paper we're looking at, it offers a really sharp perspective on this. It looks at his background, his networks, his ideology, tries to connect the dots on his international presence and, influence.
Okay, so let's get right into that core dynamic the analysis points to. This fundamental tension between being locally authentic and globally relevant for these movements.
Right. And this isn't just like academic theory. It's deeply practical. The whole idea of the Ummah, the global community of Muslims, it's incredibly powerful.
Lose your networks, legitimacy.
Exactly. Legitimacy that goes beyond just one country. But, and this is what the analysis points out, relying too heavily on that global identity, it can easily clash with the practical, often messy demands of national politics back home.
It makes you think of Benedict Anderson, his imagined communities. For Islamic leaders, maybe that imagined community isn't just the nation state, it's this huge global religious one.
Precisely. So Abdul Hadi's challenge is this really tricky balancing act. How does he keep credibility within Malaysia's political system, which is diverse, has its own rules, while also staying respected in that wider global Islamic conversation?
And it's kind of surprising, isn't it? The analysis mentions how little actual scholarly work has focused specifically on his international side.
Yeah, considering how long he's led PAS and how active he clearly is globally. So this deep dive, it helps shine a light on that less explored part of his career.
It's crucial context, especially when you think about how PAS itself has changed under him.
Big changes.
The analysis highlights that evolution, particularly since, 2015, moving from being more of a regional opposition party to a major player in government coalitions.
Yeah, and that domestic shift absolutely shapes and is shaped by his global stuff. You can't separate them.
So, to understand his approach, we really need to look at his background, his formative years, particularly his education. The paper traces it, right? From traditional Malay religious school
to the Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia.
Right. Now, Medina, that's often brought up as the key influence, isn't it? Leading some people to just label him Salafi Wahhabi, end of story.
Well, the analysis argues that view might be a bit too narrow. It kind of risks oversimplifying things. It doesn't fully account for how local context, personal experiences maybe filter those influences. The Medina link is there. It's undeniable, but
it's not the whole picture.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. The analysis brings in this other major influence, the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood.
Ah, okay.
So while Hadi was in Medina, many other important PAS leaders were studying in Cairo, and they were heavily influenced by Muslim Brotherhood thinking.
So you get this cross-pollination.
That's what the paper suggests, yeah. This interaction between different streams of thought created this unique ideological mix within PAS. You see bits of Saudi orthodoxy, maybe more obvious earlier on.
Like in his early statements.
Yeah, blended with the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood's focus on political organization, strategy, working within the existing state structures. pragmatism.
And you can see this tension in his own history,
Mm-hmm.
like the 1981 Amanat Haji Hadi that's mentioned.
Right, reflecting those perhaps stricter earlier Salafi influences, like suggesting it was forbidden to vote for non-Muslims, that kind of thing.
Yet, his career afterwards, decades in politics, shows, well, quite a bit of pragmatic flexibility, doesn't it?
That flexibility was definitely key to building his networks. Because Abdul Hadi didn't just look inward, he actively built global connections. His involvement and eventually becoming vice president of the International Union of Muslim Scholars, IUMS, that's a big example.
Although, that group, the IUMS,
Yeah.
it hasn't been without controversy. Significant controversy, actually.
Oh, absolutely not. The paper points out specifically that IUMS has been declared a terror group by the Anti-Terror Quarter of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain.
Wow. Okay. So that highlights the balancing act again.
It's incredibly delicate. Having a big role in a global Islamic body like that, it might boost his standing with certain groups back home, people who value those international religious credentials.
Sure.
But, as the analysis notes, it also creates real diplomatic headaches for Malaysia, especially with powerful Middle Eastern states who really don't like organizations like IUNs.
Yet, despite those potential problems, he still managed to get into some pretty elite networks. The paper mentions him attending events like the 2013 International Muslim Community Congress in Istanbul.
Yeah, and the analysis points out who he was with at these events. People like Tunisia's Ennahda leader Rachid Ghannouchi, Palestinian Hamas leaders Ismail Haniyeh, Khalid Mashal.
So not just any conference.
No, this signaled he was part of specific high-level global Islamist networks.
And this international activity took a really interesting turn with his official appointment, didn't it? Being named Malaysia's special envoy to the Middle East in 2021, that's a huge shift in status from party leader to, well, government representative.
It really was. And the analysis suggests this reflects kind of two things. His own personal evolution, he'd built up this international profile, and also Malaysia strategically recognizing that, hey, figures with strong Islamic credentials can be a tool. Soft power in foreign policy.
But the paper also takes a view on how effective he actually was in that role,
Right.
describing it as, what was it, largely ceremonial.
Yeah, and that analysis ties right back to those network connections we talked about.
The IUMS, Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood links.
Exactly. The paper argues his close associations with those groups constrain how effective he could be. Because, well, those groups aren't exactly on good terms with key regional players like Saudi Arabia. So it limits the doors he could potentially open.
And you have to see this in the context of Malaysia's overall foreign policy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Malaysia usually tries to position itself as like a moderate Muslim nation.
Balancing act again, Islamic identity, multiculturalism, pragmatic relations.
And Abdul Hadi's specific profile, which can seem more orthodox and includes those controversial connections, it creates both opportunities, maybe reaching certain audiences, but also risks for that carefully built image.
Mm-hmm. Risks and opportunities, all these different dynamics, the blending of influences, the adapting to context. It points towards this really interesting concept the analysis introduces: tropical Islamism.
Tropical Islamism. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that actually mean?
It's the paper's term for what it sees as a distinctly Southeast Asian approach to political Islam. It's about taking influences like that mix of Salafi Wahhabi orthodoxy and Muslim Brotherhood pragmatism we discussed,
Right.
but crucially adapting them to the very unique social and political environment of Southeast Asia.
Because the Southeast Asian context is fundamentally different from the Middle East.
Totally different. The region's Islam has always had this complex relationship between local traditions and global trends. You get unique adaptations.
And politically.
Well, unlike the Middle East, where Islamic movements often grew up fighting secular authoritarian regimes, in Southeast Asia, these movements have mostly had to deal with multi-religious societies and existing democratic institutions.
Which requires a different approach.
A very different kind of political game. More negotiation, coalition building, that sort of thing.
And PAS, under Hadi, is presented as an example of this adaptation, right? Moving from maybe being seen as rigid, ideologically pure in opposition,
To actually engaging in pragmatic coalition politics, joining governments. That reflects shifts in Malaysian politics generally, sure, but also how an Islamic movement can adapt its tactics, its alliances, while still trying to hang on to its core identity.
which brings us to maybe the most fascinating tension the analysis explores. This dynamic between Abdul Hadi's theoretical commitment to Islamic governance, including supporting things like hudud Islamic criminal law.
Right, the principles.
and his very practical, very long-term engagement with Malaysia's actual democratic parliamentary system.
Yeah, on the surface, that looks like a massive contradiction, doesn't it?
It really does.
But the paper highlights that this tension, it's not just Hadi, it's a broader challenge lots of contemporary Islamic political movements face. How do you square religious governance ideals with democratic governance realities?
So his career becomes this really interesting case study for you, the listener, to observe how Islamic leaders navigate this stuff. Sometimes they embrace democratic norms, elections, coalitions.
Play the game.
Other times they assert religious authority or principles that seem, well, outside that typical democratic framework.
And the analysis suggests his own evolution from that very strong, almost uncompromising stance in the 1981 Amanat to his later pragmatic coalition deals could actually show a kind of moderating effect, something that happens from being involved in a democratic system over a long time.
But, and this is crucial, the paper leaves us with a big open question, doesn't it? Is this evolution genuine ideological change? Like, does he now truly believe in adapting to democracy? Or is it mostly tactical adaptation using the democratic system as a tool to reach longer-term goals?
Exactly. And how you interpret that. Well, it has huge implications for understanding the potential for democratization within Islamic movements generally.
Now, we've touched on the controversies around his networks, but the analysis also looks at the broader challenges, the controversies that just come with this kind of global engagement.
Yeah, there are definite costs. Diplomatic problems are a big one. Those links to IUMS, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, they absolutely create friction with countries that see those groups as problematic.
And back home, domestically.
Well, critics often argue that his emphasis on Islamic governance, which is partly rooted in those more orthodox influences we talked about, risks alienating non-Muslims. Malaysia is multi-religious. Does it undermine national unity? That's the criticism.
But there's a counter-argument.
Sure. The analysis notes supporters would say his international profile actually boosts Malaysia's standing in the Muslim world. It can provide valuable diplomatic assets, maybe in specific situations or regions.
So his global stuff isn't separate. It's constantly feeding back into and influencing those domestic debates in Malaysia about Islam's role in public life. It's this complex loop.
Exactly. It's like the international stage and the domestic stage are always in this sometimes noisy conversation through his actions and how people react to them.
So looking back at this analysis of Abdul Hadi Awang's journey, from that provincial religious teacher, the Tuan Guru, to a figure operating in Malaysian politics and on the global stage simultaneously, what are the main takeaways for you?
I think it highlights a career just marked by remarkable pragmatic adaptation, extensive international networking, and this capacity for, well, ideological flexibility, drawing from those different influences we discussed.
Saudi, Egyptian.
Right. And these qualities, the paper argues, were fundamental, both to his own longevity as a leader and to PAS's recent political success.
And the significance goes beyond just him or PAS, right? His career, as this analysis looks at it, offers a really compelling way to look at how 21st century Islamic political movements are evolving.
Yeah. How do these movements navigate maintaining religious authenticity while engaging with democracy? How do they build transnational networks but still prioritize national interests? His journey kind of embodies all these questions.
Returning to that core idea the paper puts forward, his model of tropical Islamism.
That synthesis adapted to Southeast Asia.
It really reveals both the possibilities but also the inherent limitations maybe for religious political leadership when it operates in diverse, often democratic societies in our super globalized world.
The constraints are real.
It leaves you with a really thought-provoking final question, doesn't it? Can this unique synthesis, being a village Tuan Guru, a seasoned Malaysian politician, and a figure in these global Islamic networks, can that actually be easily replicated?
Yeah.
Or even sustained by future generations of PAS leaders?
That's the big question. And what would the answer mean? Not just for PAS, but for where Islamic political movements are heading in Southeast Asia, and maybe even further afield. It's definitely something this deep dive, guided by the analysis, encourages you to think more about.